This week in Mets, the 6 key questions they must answer by season's end. This Twilight moment is an in-between moment. It's the moment of ambivalence and ambiguity. Twilight, Los Angeles 1992, Deavere Smith, as spoken by Homi Bhabha, "We don't want to be here as an organization, in this position, ever again," New York Mets interim manager Andy Green said over the weekend. "You want to do everything humanly possible to let the guys know this is not a place we're coming back to." Advertisement, the Mets were sellers from the cellar of the National League East at this year's trade deadline, a once-inconceivable turn of events whose inevitability eroded its surprise. New York traded 7 players off its major league roster in the last 4 days.
After you work out, you can feel worn out. Reach for core power and rise to a whole new level of recovery. High-quality protein to build muscle. The nutrition you need to power on.
Ready to order? Scan the QR code now or visit grabdeal.us/10.
It will look very different for the final 2 months of a lost season. But, as Green continued, that also doesn't mean there's not a lot of meaningful games to be played before the season ends. We've got work to do. That starts with President of Baseball Operations, David Stearns, and his front office, and it starts with a clear-eyed evaluation of who the Mets are on the field heading into the winter. Typically, a team that sells this much at the deadline is just opening up opportunity for young, unproven players getting their first real looks in the majors. These Mets, on the other hand, contain several important veterans who have a lot to show over these final 49 games. Let's examine 6 key questions the Mets need to answer between now and the season finale against the Washington Nationals. Can Jorge Polanco be counted on to play first base in 2027? No single move has registered as a more profound failure for the Mets in 2026 than the decision to replace Pete Alonso at first base with Polanco. Polanco has spent almost no time at first base, as a defender or as a base runner. He's played in just 29 games, with 2 starts at first base. He's reached base safely just 22 times in those 29 games, with a slash line the team was supposed to move beyond in the era of the universal designated hitter. Polanco is still under contract for next season for $20 million, and the Mets won't, and shouldn't, move on from him this quickly. He's rebounded from subpar or injury-plagued seasons before, and he should at least get a chance to do so in 2027. Advertisement, but the Mets need to know whether Polanco can be counted on in any way as a first baseman. If so, they can be broader in their search for more offense this winter, seeking someone who can spend some time at DH or elsewhere on the diamond. If this season ends with Polanco's first base glove still covered in dust, the Mets will need to add a first baseman. Is there a role for Marcus Semien in 2027? The hope was that Semien would be able to halt, if not entirely turn around, the decline he'd experienced in his final 2 years with the Texas Rangers. Instead, it's accelerated this season, with his bat one of the worst among everyday players in the league and his defense plummeting below the league average. Part of the rationale in swapping out Brandon Nimmo for Semien was that, when the time came, it would be easier to eat the remainder of the contract and release the player with Semien than it would be with a longtime fan favorite like Nimmo. Obviously, the expectation was not that the Mets would have to think about cutting ties with Semien just 1 season after the trade. But if the veteran remains this player through the end of the season, the Mets can't enter 2027 planning for him to be the everyday second baseman. They should seriously contemplate eating the $48 million remaining on his contract through 2028 and just moving on. After looking like he'd really turned the corner last season, Beatty has taken another large step back this season. His Ops Plus is the same as Semien's, and Beatty is not expected to provide Gold Glove defense at a premium position. Beatty is now 400 games and just shy of 1,400 Major League plate appearances into his career, with an Ops Plus of 82, or 18% below the league average. There are very few productive Major League players who start their careers with such a prolonged stretch of offensive struggle, and almost all of them earned the extra opportunities by playing the most important defensive positions on the field, like catcher, shortstop, and center field. That's not Beatty, who will have to replicate the rare achievement of players like Mike Moustakas and Luis Valbuena to put it all together this deep into his major league tenure. It's possible but not likely, and the Mets should give Beatty the everyday time necessary to make a final decision on whether Beatty should be a starter, a utility player, or an ex-Met over these next 2 months. Advertisement: Can Francisco Alvarez get back to being a good defensive catcher? For much of the season, we've lumped Alvarez in with Beatty and Mark Vientos as part of the one-time baby Mets, who have stagnated at the big league level. That's not entirely fair to Alvarez, who sits second on the Mets in OPS this season and whose career numbers outpace those of Beatty and Vientos. But what has regressed for Alvarez has been his work behind the plate. Alvarez took most in the industry by surprise when he excelled immediately as a defender in his first full season in 2023. Since then, his game behind the plate has vacillated between good and bad, an inconsistency aggravated by the presence of Luis Torrens and his defensive excellence as his backup. The only reason to trade Alvarez this deadline would have been if the Mets didn't think he could be a viable major league catcher into the future. Instead, New York held on to Alvarez at a time when catcher Adley Rutschman generated an enormous prospect haul from the Boston Red Sox, on the belief that he could return to being an above-average defensive backstop. Torrens is terrific as a backup, but the Mets' lineup needs are different if he's in there for Alvarez more than half the time. Nolan McLean and Christian Scott have each written their names in ink for the 2027 rotation, barring injury. Thornton has a ways to go to get there, and it's been interesting to hear Green delineate between what McLean and Scott have done this year and what Thornton has accomplished in his handful of starts. Asked about the three of them over the weekend, Green was clear to put McLean and Scott in a different bucket than Thornton because of the longer track record, with both Freddie Peralta and Clay Holmes traded. Thornton should have runway here between now and the end of the season to establish whether he should enter spring training as a favorite for the rotation or as starting depth. No part of the Mets roster was changed more in the last few days than the bullpen, which was cut in half by deals involving Luke Weaver, Brooks Raley, AJ. That quartet essentially served as the bridge to Devin Williams, and now the Mets will have 2 months of tryouts, probably painful ones, to determine whether anyone can be part of the solution in 2027. They'll welcome Daniel Nunez back into the fold Tuesday, alongside ex-Xavier Curry, Jeffrey Yan, Nate Lavender, and Chase McDermott. Yan and Lavender will give Green a pair of lefties to audition, while Nunez has the best chance of earning a longer look coming off Tommy John surgery. McDermott came from the Los Angeles Dodgers in Monday's minor trade for catcher Ben Rortvedt. Advertisement: We understand we're going to have to go out and acquire relievers in the offseason in different ways to get our bullpen to where we expect it to be in 2027, Stearns said Monday. We're also excited for some of the members of our pen going forward, who are going to have a chance to contribute at the major league level, who we think will do a very good job. And hey, maybe that even means Kodai Senga. The Mets remain intrigued about Senga's potential as a one-inning reliever, though they may continue to need him in the rotation or as a long man for the time being. Senga has 1 year remaining on his contract. The exposition the Mets, let's see, can I remember? Oh yeah, they dropped 3 of 4 to the Miami Marlins over the weekend. The Cleveland Guardians lost 2 of 3 to the Arizona Diamondbacks at home over the weekend, and Cleveland is just 6-10 since the All-Star break. Overall, it's 57-56 and in second in the American League Central while holding the league's final wild card. The Pittsburgh Pirates rebounded from losing 3 of 4 in Cincinnati to win a series opener in Milwaukee on Monday night. Pittsburgh is 57-57, in third in the NL Central and just on the outside of the NL wildcard picture. The Bucks are in Milwaukee for 3 more through Thursday. The pitching possibles at Cleveland: LHP Sean Mania, 2.5, 4.42 ERA versus LHP Joey Quintillo, 8.6, 3.88 ERA RHP Christian Scott, 3.3, 2.99 versus RHP Slade Sekoni, 4.7, 4.78, RHP Nolan McLean, 7.7, 3.29 versus RHP Tanner Bibby, 4.11, 3.81 at Pittsburgh LHP Zach Thornton, 2.2. 2.88 versus RHP Carmen Mladzinski, 6.3, 3.15 TBA Vs. RHP Bubba Chandler, 4.8, 4.49, LHP Sean Mania versus RHP Jard Jones, 2.2, 3.81, injury updates red equals 60-day IL orange equals 15-day IL blue equals 10-day IL Perez's flexor strain is relatively mild, according to Green. The lefty will take August to rehab before the club decides on his status for September. Minor league schedule AAA, Syracuse versus Columbus, Cleveland AA, Binghamton versus Hartford, Colorado High A, Brooklyn at Wilmington, Washington Low A, St. Daytona, Cincinnati. Advertisement, a note on the epigraph. Whenever I read a play, I think about how I would prefer to see it performed, though never more so than while reading Smith's one-woman piece of documentary theater. Trivia time, the Mets famously traded Scott Kazmir in the ill-conceived deal for Victor Zambrano at the 2004 trade deadline. Kazmir finished his career with 25.1 wins above replacement, according to Fangraphs. What player that the Mets also traded that day finished his career with more? Hint, the Mets traded this player away the same day they acquired him. He would actually suit up for the Mets in the final year of his career. I'll reply to the correct answer in the comments.